Thank you for tuning in to the Golden State Media Concepts football podcast, where we discuss the latest news, rumors, and games of the NFL and college football. As always, I'm your host, Jeremiah, and I'm back again. I talked about Tony Romo and where he might end up on the fantasy football show last Friday. And it looks like there was I'm going to continue to have those talks with you guys out there. Well, there was a article by Peter King in the Monday Morning Quarterback about potential landing spots of Tony Romo. He thinks that Kansas City and Houston are the two most likely spots. And I think those are the two most likelier spots for him to go to if Tony Romo wants to win a Super Bowl. So, with Kansas City and Houston, let's talk about each team first. Houston, they made the playoffs. They've won the division. They have really good success with Bill O'Brien ever since he stepped in as a head coach. And, this team had one of the very best defenses in the league. J.J. Watt did not play. He was injured the entire year. Jadeveon Clowney finally came out and had a great season. So this defense is still pretty good, but they just couldn't get over the hump. Their offense just couldn't perform up to their defense. Maybe that's because of the quarterback position. And if Tony Romo goes to Houston, this team is a Super Bowl contender. Could be a Super Bowl favorite. That's how big of a player Tony Romo could be for the Texans. And when you talk about Tony Romo and the Chiefs, this is another possibility as well. See, the only thing about Kansas City is they have Alex Smith as their quarterback, and Peter King in his Monday morning quarterback article says that Andy Reid even pointed out that he's never mind upsetting the apple cart for a potential special player, and that Alex Smith will be mature enough to handle the situation of the addition of Romo to the roster. But, I kind of have to feel bad for Alex Smith if that's happened because, he lost this job once before. Can he lose it again? Probably. But if Tony Romo goes to the Kansas City Chiefs, he's got to go to the AFC. He's got a tougher road to the Super Bowl. He's got to face the Denver Broncos twice a year. He's got to face the Oakland Raiders twice a year. The Chargers aren't as good as those two teams, but he still has to play Phil Rivers in that offense twice a year. So it's a tougher road for Tony Romo to potentially make a Super Bowl run. So I do think Houston is the team that I expect him to go to because it's an easier division. It's an easier Super Bowl run. I think if he goes in the AFC, he has only two teams to worry about. That is the New England Patriots and the Pittsburgh Steelers. And he can worry about the Chiefs too, but I still think the Steelers and the Patriots are the two best teams in the AFC. When you go to the NFC, which I don't think Tony Romo is going to go to, it's a little too many teams are too good in the NFC. But in the AFC, I do think that's where Tony Romo is going to end up because, for one, the road to the Super Bowl is a little easier, slightly easier, even though New England's really good. There's only two teams to worry about there. When you go to the NFC, there's like 5 of them. You got to worry about all of them. So I do think Houston is the more likelier team to, is the more likelier team to land Tony Romo because of the division and because of that defense. And it's just too good of a spot for him not to go to. And it's still in Texas, It's still in Texas. Okay, well, there was a report earlier, I think on Friday or last Thursday, that said that Tony Romo is expected to be released and not traded, which is saying that Tony Romo will have his choice of hitting the open market and will choose which team he will go to. Well, there's a lot of teams out there that really need a quarterback. The Browns, 49ers, Bears. Tony Romo's not going to those three teams. And, there is the Texans, what I just named. The Chiefs have not been actually brought up a lot because, they made the playoffs and they have a quarterback. But, the Chiefs have always been that team to just be good enough to make the playoffs, but they haven't been over the hump to making the Super Bowl. And I did say the Jets, too, can be a possibility. That was a bold move that I figured out that he could go to. And there is the Buffalo Bills. But the two teams that he will win the Super Bowl with will be in Kansas City and Houston. And I actually do like him in both spots. In Kansas City, that team is a clear-cut Super Bowl favorite if he steps in there. Houston and clear-cut Super Bowl favorite. The thing, if he goes to Kansas City, what are the Chiefs going to do with Alex Smith? Alex Smith is signed to 2018. He's a free agent in 2019. What are they going to do with both quarterbacks? Or if Tony Romo has like two good 3 years left in him. So are they just going to keep Alex Smith on the bench, or are they going to trade him? Like what are they going to do with both of these quarterbacks? Well, if the Chiefs do get Tony Romo, it looks like Nick Foles is expected to be the casualty of the team. And it looks like they are going to keep both of them if that does indeed happen. But I'm telling you right now, the addition of Tony Romo would make this Chiefs offense better. Tyreek Hill, his numbers would be better. Travis Kelce's numbers will be better. Jeremy Maclin will be a relevant receiver again. So, I do think the Chiefs is a good spot for him, but I like him to go to the Texans because it is an easier division. It is a little bit of an easier road to make the playoffs. And they're a Super Bowl favorite. And when I look at the rosters when I compare these two rosters, the Chiefs and the Texans, to me, I feel like the Chiefs have just a little more talent than the Texans do, but the reason why I think Tony Romo will go to the Texans is, for one, basically the division that this team is in. It's just easy. Like, I know the Colts are in there, but the Colts have a tough time building around Andrew Luck, and he looks like he's their only good top player. And, Texans are getting J.J. Watt back, so there you go. When you have a team of J.J. Watt and Jadeveon Clowney on each side of the defense, and you got Tony Romo throwing it to DeAndre Hopkins, who could be a top 5 receiver again, that is pretty scary, I might say. That's pretty scary, but it remains to be seen where Tony Romo will end up. All right, well, I'm going to take my first break, and when I get back, I'm going to talk about Adrian Peterson and his flirtation to play for the New York Giants. I will talk about that when I get back to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast, and I talked about Adrian Peterson last week on the Fantasy Football Show as well, but I wanted to continue this conversation here on the Football Podcast because I still think it's relevant heading towards free agency in a couple of weeks here. Well, Minnesota, they've had the worst rushing attack this entire year. It was just abysmal. And Adrian Peterson had his worst season with the team ever in his career. And he's made it known he kind of wants to play for the New York Giants. And he didn't officially say he wants to play, but it looks like he's flirting with the idea as a possible fit. Adrian Peterson took to Twitter and said the Giants have been making some interesting moves. And if you don't remember what those moves are, is that the Giants cut Rashad Jennings, a starting running back from last year. They cut him along with Victor Cruz to save money in the cap space. And the Vikings, they're looking at this running back here that they drafted 10 years ago, and I honestly think if I'm in the front office of Minnesota, I'm asking to myself what I should do with Adrian Peterson. Like, what should I do? He's going to be 31 or going to be 32. He's an aging player. He had his worst season. He looks like he's not the same player that we drafted 10 years ago. He was coming off a torn meniscus. And is he going to help us win now? Is he going to help us go to the playoffs now? Well, the Vikings had a great start to the season. Started out 6-0. Then they had a bad stretch of losses. And, Adrian Peterson he only played in like 3 games. And when he was on the field, he wasn't productive at all. Just wasn't. So, if I'm in the front office in Minnesota, am I going to hold on to Adrian Peterson to help me win now? First of all, right now, do I think the Minnesota Vikings are a playoff team? I think that's kind of I don't know if they are a playoff team right now. They have a great defense. I just think there are issues of running the football, and quarterback play has been an issue for this team, especially last year. So I don't know if they're a playoff team, but I think if if I'm in the front office in Minnesota, and it looks like if he can't help us win now, am I going to cut him? Well, it looks like Peterson is set to draw a non-guaranteed $18 million salary in 2017. It looks like the Vikings could look towards a renegotiation, to sign him to a 1-year deal that's worth around $6.4 million. $3.2 million of it will be guaranteed, so that's one option that they can go to. And if Minnesota, if they can include maybe a 2 or 3 year option that can be picked up if his performance even exceeds expectations, then that's something they can do. But if both sides cannot work out a deal that is good for each other, I think the Vikings, I think they're going to cut Peterson. I think there's a good chance that they will cut Peterson because of his contract. And if they can't work out a renegotiated deal before March 12th, I think the Vikings will cut him. I think they will. Peterson's money, his $11.75 million base salary, will be guaranteed along with his $6 million roster bonus. It will be guaranteed on March 12th. So if they decide to cut him, they will save that money. And if Minnesota does cut Adrian Peterson, Adrian Peterson could potentially have his choosing of which team to go to. I do think the New York Giants could be a possible fit. That is a team that is ready to win now. That is a team that could make the playoffs again. And I think the major problem with the Giants last season was they couldn't run the football. They just couldn't run the football at all. And I'm not saying Adrian Peterson's going to go lights out, but I'm just saying he can potentially help that game. And remember, he still is Adrian Peterson. He still is. And he still has that name. But I do think that's a possible fit there. I think the Green Bay Packers could be a fit as well. He could potentially help that team win. This is a team that has Super Bowl aspirations, but they've just been good enough to make the playoffs. So that is a good fit right there. I think those are the two teams that fit him the best, because I don't think he's going to the playoffs with the Vikings. I don't think the Vikings are going to make the playoffs this year. I just think there's too many good teams in that division, and I kind of think there's too many good teams in the NFC. So, it might be a long shot that the Vikings will make the playoffs, and, Adrian Peterson, I think he's someone that wants to win the Super Bowl, because that's probably one of the only things left that he hasn't done yet. He's had a 2,000-yard season. He has MVP. He has Comeback Player of the Year awards. He's won those. He's been to the playoffs. He has done everything that he needed to do to be a Hall of Famer except for win the Super Bowl. And even if he doesn't win a Super Bowl or even goes to one, I still think he's a first ballot Hall of Famer because he was the best running back in his era. Well, if the Vikings do cut Adrian Peterson, they could look at potential free agents that include Latavius Murray, who I think Oakland might make a deal with him. They got Eddie Lacy, D'Angelo Williams, Terrence West, and Darren McFadden. So those are guys that they can potentially look to. And remember, the Vikings don't have a first-round pick because, they did use that first-round pick to acquire Sam Bradford. But they do have a second-round pick, and they could potentially look at running backs who could potentially fall to the second round. Christian McCaffrey could be a second-rounder. Dante Foreman Brian Hill from Wyoming, Jamal Williams from BYU. Joe Mixon can be a second rounder. Joe Mixon will probably more likely be there. Christian McCaffrey might be a first rounder, but there is some guys they can look forward to in the draft to fit that running back position. So, if I had to make a prediction, I think Adrian Peterson is going to get cut this offseason. I think he's going to go to the New York Giants, and the Giants are going to try to build a dream team. Because when you look at the name, Adrian Peterson, Odell Beckham Jr., Eli Manning, those are guys that have big names and is the biggest market in the country. So I do think that it's going to be a real possibility. And this is a very tough division, very competitive division next year because, the Cowboys are not going anywhere. The Eagles are going to be better. The Redskins, if they happen to sign Kirk Cousins, are still going to be a real good offense. So I do think that Adrian Peterson does help them win, but he's not going to be the same guy that he was 2 years ago before the injury. But I do think he is someone that will help them win. They still got Paul Perkins too, who I really like. They have him to take pretty much to be the complimentary back there. So that can bode very well for the Giants. And, Adrian Peterson did express interest that he does want to play for Tampa Bay and Houston. So we could potentially get a team with Tony Romo and Houston at the same time. We could potentially get a team with Doug Martin and Adrian Peterson in the same backfield, or we can get the same team with Odell Beckham Jr. and Adrian Peterson. So it's going to be interesting to see. So I think if I had to make a prediction, I think Adrian Peterson will be cut by Minnesota and will go to the New York Giants. That's my prediction right now. All right, well, I'm going to take my last break, and I'm just going to tell you a roundup of stories when I get back. I'm going to talk about Cameron Wake. Darrelle Revis, the video came out of his altercation in Pittsburgh, and Trent Richardson is back in the news. So I'm going to do a little bit of roundup of stories when I get back to the Goals to Me Concepts Football Podcast.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red-hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's gsmcpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
All right, well, a day after Darrelle Revis was charged with 4 felonies and a misdemeanor from his altercation last weekend in Pittsburgh, Darrelle Revis turned himself in last Friday and was released on non-monetary bond after turning himself in to the Pittsburgh police. Well, there was a video on TMZ that surfaced, and it showed the 2 men unconscious that were involved in this physical altercation. And it shows Revis. Well, Revis is not in the video, but there is a man bragging about knocking both of these men out. And the audio, which was published by TMZ, shows the 2 men prone on the ground. Features a man off camera saying, "I knocked both of these bleep out. Both of them, they both sleeping. Shut up before I knock your bleep out." And according to TMZ, to the post that it made about this video, it said it appears officials believe the voice is Darrelle. Well, police report in connection with the incident says that a witness told police that Revis said to him do you want to be next? So it looks like there's proof that Darrelle Revis did do this, or allegedly he did this, I should say. And Darrelle Revis attorneys issued a statement that this video by TMZ will prove that Revis is not the person who knocked these men out. This is what his attorneys said in a statement. Quote, Darrelle Revis absolutely, categorically, and positively did not knock out anyone. He did not conspire with anyone to commit an assault, did not say shut up before I knock your spliff out next, and surely did not rob another of a cell phone. The voice and admissions made on the video are not that of Darrelle Revis. We have no doubts about that. Further investigation relative to clothing and voice verification will corroborate the above assertions. So, Revis is due back in court Thursday. Revis did not answer any questions from the media. He's made his way to the Pittsburgh police buildings on Friday. He was accompanied by Blaine Jones, his attorney, and family members. So Jones told ESPN before the arrangement that he believes Revis has a very good case. He described his client as serious, somber, and quote-unquote ready to answer charges. So, with all this out there now, with this video out there, I do think we have maybe potentially see the end of Darrelle Revis' career, because I do think the Jets are more willing to cut him now. And, his attorney said that was not Darrelle Revis in the video. We don't see him. It kind of doesn't sound like him in a way, but, I'm not going to get into more of the legal stuff here. So, from a football standpoint, it looks like this gives more leverage to the Jets of cutting Revis. So, he costs us a lot of money. He had his worst year of his career ever. And, the Jets, they're awful anyway. They want to get better. And I don't think Revis makes this team better. And I kind of think, with the way that Darrelle Revis, with this story about Darrelle Revis, I kind of think it gives him a reason why to cut him. I wouldn't be surprised at all. And he's still talented enough and a big name to get money from another team. But I do think they are going to wait out the legal process of this. So if the Jets do cut Darrelle Revis, there's a chance maybe Revis may not be signed to August, September. I don't think that will happen. I do think there will be a time. I do think there will be a team that will sign him before the start of training camp. But it remains to be seen. My prediction is that I think the Jets will cut Darrelle Revis. And I do think there will be a team willing to take a chance on him. But I do think Darrelle Revis needs to change to safety, because he doesn't have the same. I don't think he has the ability he used to have to play cornerback. So it remains to be said about Darrelle Revis there. Well, sticking to the subject here of legal matters. Former running back Trent Richardson, who used to be with the Browns, he jumped around a couple other NFL teams like the Colts and the Raiders, and he was former Alabama running back star. He's facing a misdemeanor domestic violence charge in Alabama. So police in Birmingham say the 26-year-old was jailed Friday in Hoover City Jail and was set at a $1,000 bond. He was released Friday just before 3 p.m. In a police statement, officers received a call about yelling coming from a guest room at a hotel. Thursday night, it said police responded and found a woman with scratches and bruises on her face. The statement said that the two argued earlier at Walmart, and they continued the argument at that hotel. So paramedics treated the woman, but she didn't require further medical attention. Hoover Police Captain Greg Rector said he was cooperative. Trent was arrested without incident. And it looks like that's all there is. That looks like that's all what the story has come about. Richardson did play. He has been out of the league for about 2 years now. He was supposed to be part of the Indianapolis Colts championship run when they got him, but it just didn't work out for him. And Trent Richardson just looked really slow. He just didn't look like the same guy he was in Alabama. But all I can say about Trent Richardson is that there hasn't been a court date set for Richardson's domestic violence charge, and records show that, records that aren't yet available to show that Richardson has a lawyer. So we don't know if he does or not. But this is a story to keep an eye on, throughout the off season, because I feel like this is something that's going to go on, especially when the legal process starts, and we'll keep it updated as best as we can here at the GSMC Podcast Network. Okay, well, I'm going to end a story. I'm going to end this show on a story on an extension for the Miami Dolphins. Well, it looks like Cameron Wake has got a new 2-year extension that's worth $19 million. Cameron Wake was just a freak of nature this year. He was just a freak of nature. He overcame adversity by bouncing back from his season-ending Achilles injury in 2015, and my gosh, 2016 he was a beast. He led the Dolphins with 11.5 sacks at 35 years old. He made his 5th career Pro Bowl, and this team was a major reason that they made the playoffs. So, Dolphins Vice President Mike Tenenbaum said his biggest priority this offseason was taking care of his own players. Wake, of course, was one of them. He was the first major in-house signing they wanted to take care of. And the Dolphins are expected to discuss contract extensions with Jarvis Landry and Rashad Jones. Both have 1 year on their contract. So I do think with the fact that the Dolphins have released former defensive linemen Mario Williams and Earl Mitchell, I do think that is a reason that this could, the extension was working out. They cleared up cap space. They look like they're about to trade Brendan Albert, their left tackle, for Julius Thomas, which is a deal that I like. I do like Julius Thomas coming to Miami. He could potentially be a huge part of the Miami Dolphins offense for Ryan Tannehill. But, they needed to start taking care of their own star players. Cameron Wake is one of those guys. And, Jarvis Landry, Rashad Jones, they've been really valuable players for this team who both have 1 year on the contracts. And I do like this deal for the Dolphins. Cameron Wake has 2 years left. He is 35, so I do think he has at least 2 to 3 good years left in him. And he looks like he hasn't lost a step. So I do like this signing for the Dolphins. They look like they are all in to make the playoffs again next year. And, this team, they're in the East, but, I think they could potentially be another wild card team. But for me, it's tough to say that they can make it again because they're in a division with probably the best quarterback of all time, probably the best coach of all time. So it's going to be tough to win that division. But I do think if the Bills get another quarterback, I think if they get a quarterback, I think they can be really good. I think the Bills can be a playoff contender. The Jets are probably off the playoff radar for now. So I do think this is a very tough division next year if, the Bills get a quarterback. And if the Dolphins if they play any way that they did, if Jay Ajayi has any close to the season that he did, I do think this team can be a potential playoff team again. But I do like this deal for Cameron Wake and the Miami Dolphins, because Wake was like one of those guys you just cannot get rid of. You just can't. He's been one of Miami's leaders in the locker room. Very emotional. I like this signing for both teams. All right, well, that's going to conclude the show. I'd like to thank you guys for tuning in. I'll be back tomorrow to discuss any type of football news that occurs over the next 24 hours. We could potentially have an update on Darrelle Revis, maybe Trent Richardson, who knows. Maybe teams would announce extensions. Maybe franchise tags will happen. We don't know. Anything can happen over the next 24 hours, but I will discuss that tomorrow with you guys. As always, I'm Jeremiah. I thank you guys for tuning in to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast, and you guys have a great day.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.